G'day everybody, how you going today? It is so good to see you. I do hope that you are ridiculously well. Well, today I'm starting a new series which is called In Search Of. And today I'm in search of Melbourne. Yes, things that might make you feel like you're in Melbourne. But a special extra twist, no Z, no E. We're going to shoot on the Hasselblad. Yes, my beautiful, proper medium format. Yes, it's much bigger than a GFX 100. 60 megapixel CMOS. No, CCD. 16 bits of gorgeous Hasselbladness. Now, this camera is probably, I don't know, 7, 8 years old. Might even be slightly older. But the thing is, it has an astonishing optics on the front of it, and also they say that there's something to do with medium format and the size that it is compared to how we see. I haven't done too much exploration into this, but there is certainly a certain something, a certain je ne sais quoi about the Hasselblad medium format, and maybe even large format takes it to another level as well. Okay, well, we're here in Focus, spelled with a PH, and this is Hasselblad's own software, and this is the latest version, just downloaded, and I noticed that they've put new algorithms in here to suppress chromatic aberration, which is great because it has been a bit of an issue with this camera. I last used this software over a year ago when I made an X1D video, and I haven't used the H4D since 2017. We're here shooting the first piece of Melbourne Alia, which is the Brighton Baths. And, well, there it is over there. So let's get a shot of that with the old Hasselblad. Whoopsie. Hear that amazing shutter sound. Hear it? Gorgeous. Not having used this camera for 4 or 5 years, as I said, there's some quirks that I forgot about. The first one is you really have to underexpose it when you're in super bright situations like this. That's number one. You've got to really underexpose it. Number two is the back screen just does not work in daylight/sunlight. Like, it works, but it is so dark that it really doesn't give you a sense of what is going on. And that's why I overexposed some of these. And this is at 100%. So we are looking at pixel for pixel, but there is absolutely no sense of pixels. And I think this is what the Hasselblad and perhaps other medium format cameras are all about. It's about making it really feel supernatural. Not supernatural. Making it feel very natural, not ghostly. This is an OVF, not an EVF, so you could not look at the files in the viewfinder. So we're going a bit old school, and that's totally cool. That's what this is all about. It's got its pros and cons, as always. I need to definitely underexpose the files even more than I kind of was at times. So taking all that into account, that I've just forgotten that basic rule with this camera, but you can see here when the sun is not in the frame, all of this looks very, very natural. So another thing about this sensor that we have to keep in mind, like, to me, that all looks fabulous, really, really natural, not very much done to the file. We can, and if we turn everything down, again, to repeat, it looks most natural when you just turn everything off, which is fine. That makes sense. That's kind of its base. But we do have moire going on here, and you don't see it very often with this sensor because it is a very high resolution sensor, basically just shy of 9,000 pixels at 8,956 wide. So this doesn't happen very often, does happen, you got to be aware of it, is somewhat difficult to fix at times. Not the end of the world. You can use these cameras outdoors. Here I am using it outdoors. It's fine outdoors. You've just got to be careful. But a lot of people would probably just use these cameras in the studio, and that would be that. That may well be just simply what they do. So again, optically, the dimensionality of this medium format, it's beautiful, and you can see it here in a file like this, but we've just got to be aware of what we're doing here in the sky and in the clouds and trying to maintain it. Now again, if you turn everything off and you don't try and recover that, you know, that's okay. I think that's
a completely acceptable outcome. It doesn't look distorted, and the level of quality, if we go in there pixel for pixel, that is just beautiful. And that's just the power of this camera, is you can kind of just come into parts of it and it still just looks solid and natural. And it is different. This is the Brighton Baths, one of the landmarks that I don't think there are too many of these around left in Australia or the world, where this area here is actually fenced off as shark protection. So you can swim in, and these are like 150 years old, and you can swim in there without getting eaten by sharks. That's a positive. That's a good thing. Established 1881, 141 years ago. I got this one right to try and maintain the sky. And again, we can see, you know, how much you can bring things up, and if you want to have a bit more contrast, and we can give it a bit more color, whatever you want to do. Mess around. And I think the Hasselblad files really are good at being messed around with. There's just a lot of quality there, and they just kind of hang together. This is not a folio shot.
Indeed, the things that they have in common as cameras are, well, they're both cameras. They both have interchangeable lenses, and they both have storage media, although the Hasselblad, it takes CF, good old-fashioned compact flash. How about that? As opposed to CF Express. So they don't have that in common.
We can see here that the Hasselblad has about 2.5 times the sensor area of the Z9. That's pretty impressive. And it is about 50% larger than the GFX 100. And this is why I'm interested in Nikon putting a larger sensor inside the Z mount. If possible, of course. Just larger photo sites. I'm not looking for more megapixels.
One's 60 megapixels and the other one's 45 megapixels. One can shoot 20 frames per second in RAW at 45 megapixels. The other can shoot 1.5 frames per second in RAW at 60 megapixels, although it is 16-bit. So we've got to give it a bit of props for that, don't we? The Hasselblad doesn't shoot video at all. No, there is no video in that camera. It doesn't exist, doesn't happen. I think the most modern of Hasselblad cameras do shoot video, but it's not 8K. So not only is there no video, but there's no 8K. And that's probably about it, about what they have in common. The way they shoot, even the aspect ratio of the cameras are different. So not only are we in search of Melbourne-alia, but we are also in search of old school. Yes, we are old school. And today we're shooting on the Z50 with the Viltrox 23mm 1.4 DX lens. And I think it's looking pretty good. Alrighty, well, we are here, the Brighton bathing boxes. And today we are going to be shooting with the Insta360 with the 1-inch mod. And I'm going to be popping it on top of the Hasselblad in the hot shoe so we can have a little bit of POV as I go. Alrighty, sounds like fun. Oh, that's a railway line, just in case you were wondering. And to see another piece of Melbourne-alia, the bathing boxes. And here they are. That's a nice light, which is not going to last for very long.
Now I wanted to show you this file. So here we are at the bathing boxes. Now the bathing boxes are something that you can buy and own, and it's like a little garage size thing. You could probably just squeeze a car in there, and it's your own changing room and so on when you're at the beach. Only for rich people. They cost a lot of money. But this is a pretty cute little file. I've messed around with it a bit. We can see the sky has blown out because I didn't underexpose it enough. But you know what? I actually quite like the way that looks, except for this business going on in here. Here's the file with no adjustments. And maybe all we need to do here is a bit of clarity, just to give it a bit more crunch. I wouldn't mind it being a little bit darker, I just want that sky to hold together. And what I'm not liking is just this discoloration here. Ultimately, you might jump into Photoshop just to get this sky to be a bit more natural. But besides that, you know, that's looking really nice. And this was about showing short depth of field on the 4.8 lens. And as we can see here, gorgeous natural reproduction of this grass, lots of detail. We can even see the hair on the grass. It's lovely. The out of focus areas look great. This is the thing. Optically, it's just spectacular, and it does it without trying. It's just such a beautiful camera.
Now, as we can see down here, I don't know if it's too wide angle, but some of the bathing boxes are having a bit of a hard time with the erosion. All right, well, we've hit a couple of locations with the Hasselblad. Look, the lighting's not optimal, you know, but that's okay. The picture quality of this camera is just ridiculous. And let me just talk you through a little bit about this camera. This thing's very heavy. I'll write below how heavy it is, but I reckon all of this is far exceeding 2 kilograms, maybe even 2.5 kilograms. A beautiful 24mm lens here, but because the format of this is almost square, it's an enormous size frame at 14 or 15mm, 35mm equivalent. You have this huge screen on the back here, but it's not overly bright, which means it doesn't even work that well in not that bright light. It works better at nighttime, and we're heading towards nighttime now. My eyepiece I left at home. It is in the Hasselblad bag. It's actually quite hard to look through this without the eyepiece, but I'm still working. Very slow to start up. It takes probably near on 10 seconds to start up. One thing is though, the viewfinder works because it's an OVF, so you can sort of be trying to frame up your shot, although I've usually seen my shot before I put the camera to my face, largely. So yeah, slow startup time. This is the battery. It's here in the grip, and well, we'll see how long it lasts. I reckon this will be a 4 or 5 hour session going on and off, and we've already used 10% just for those first few shots, so it doesn't last a super huge amount of time. Anyway, let's keep going, and I hope the light improves. The clouds have rolled over. They're not the best. Anyway, we will persevere. Alrighty, well, I've had a little play with the Hasselblad. I will get out again next week. You know, it's really interesting changing from, say, a Z9 to this camera. It's obviously completely different, as I was kind of joking about on the way here. Just to give you an idea, we are shooting on the Z50. The sun has set. We're on the 23mm Viltrox 1.4, and I think it's looking pretty good. And we're going to get some interesting car lights and light streaks and all that sort of stuff happening as I drive home. So who would get this camera? Why would anybody get this camera? Get the 60 megapixels, huge sensor, 16-bit. I mean, there's obviously things like the GFX. And interestingly, I was just looking on KEH, don't work for KEH, and just the body alone, there was one on there, and just the body alone is still 11,000 US dollars. So that has to say something about the quality of this camera. Lenses, I was looking on B&H, lens still $7,000. Now I think that's probably buying a new one, but I suppose secondhand they might be half the price or something like that. So you're still talking, I don't know, close to $15,000 to get this camera secondhand with one lens. 15,000 US dollars. And by the way, that was the 50 megapixel version of this camera. The one I have is the 60 megapixel version. Who gets this camera? Why do you get it? And I suppose it's all about picture quality. Now, we will have a look at the picture quality. I have shot with this camera before, of course. And there's things that it does amazingly. I do think the sensor in there is something like 10 years old. And obviously the lens technology is also quite old. But you do get 16-bit files, amazing. And they are amazing files, and the optics are amazing. So if you've got a specific use case, which is just about super duper high quality, and I was reading about the recent Hasselblad, the 400, can't remember its exact name, but it's a 100 megapixel sensor which can use shifting technology to get 400 megapixels, and these cameras are used for archiving. And that makes perfect sense. You've got a super duper amount of resolution to archive. Okay, that's cool. So this camera sits in that sort of category, and certainly if 60 megapixels is enough for, you know, the type of photography you want to do, then, you know, it could be a good purchase. Also, the optics are really interesting because you can get these really wide lenses that don't distort. They do distort a little bit, but gosh, they're wide. I mean, again, you know, I was asked, why do I want a small medium format Nikon Z camera? And it's because medium format is just different. Now, is it as obvious with the GFX sized sensor versus this one? Well, it's probably not as obvious, but there still is going to be a difference, isn't there? So yeah, there's something very special about real medium format, and there's just something probably special about cameras that are larger than 35mm. I've got to get my hands on a GFX. I need to have a play with them and just see what it feels like, especially for my use case. In a way, I've been holding off because I'd love Nikon to do it, but I do still think if it's ever going to happen, the earliest it might be is 2024. I just don't think it would be a priority for them. And that's fine, I get that. They've got a lot of other work to do, a lot of other things to get done.
In the end, I did decide to give the city a bit of a go. This image, I underexposed it because I shot this image very, very quickly. So that's it underexposed. But you can see, even if we pull it up quite a long way, and that looks really nice. And we can bring more color into it if we want. But the Hasselblad does such a good job that you kind of don't need to do much. Get your exposure right, and you're doing pretty well. But we're pushing this file pretty hard, and I reckon it's still hanging in there very nicely. And can we recover those fish, flying fish? Yeah, we can. So you can just make a decision on what you want them to look like. We're here at 100%. It's just drawing the image on my 5-year-old iMac. Just look at what that looks like. Let's turn that recovery off and the shadow off. Okay, we'll just bring that up a little bit, but wow. I just love the level of detail, love the quality that we are getting here. Those bricks and everything just look spot on. The way this light is being handled looks spot on. That amount of flaring, that's a fine amount of flaring from my perspective. You could have more or you could have less. Part of why I love street photography is because of messing things up. The dirty frame that I've coined before, but the dirty frame is not just having objects in the foreground, middle ground and background, but it can also be flares and lighting and dust particles in the sky, all sorts of different things just to make the frame more interesting and more realistic, not perfect in inverted commas and pristine. So that to me is a lovely frame. I probably prefer the cropping of what we were just looking at, which is something like that, and I definitely didn't get it straight, which is frustrating. Let's fix that, shall we? I like this style of tool. Capture One should have this style of tool. I think that's got us about right. Yeah, so that's really nice and really realistic looking. Lovely rendition. Down this laneway, and there was actually somebody sleeping down here, and it can be potentially dangerous. So I very quickly just took one frame, didn't get it straight, but I felt it was prudent to keep moving. Let's straighten that. Hopefully that's a vertical. Does that feel about right or too far out? It's so hard to tell. There's so many different lines, but I don't think that's right. It's so hard to see anything vertical or horizontal in this picture. Maybe this is horizontal. I don't know. Maybe I got closer to horizontal than I thought. Bring up the shadows a bit. But why I want to photograph this and show it to you is just the immense amount of texture and detail that this camera captures. Now, we can see it's a multi-second exposure here. 4 seconds, and the ISO, the base ISO is 50, and this is 4 seconds at f4.8. So you can see here the plant, this vine, blowing in the wind. But yes, very nice. I would say the focus point was here somewhere. This is slightly out of focus. So these are not the greatest shots. I went through here very quickly. This was like 15 minutes of shooting, next to nothing. I was feeling quite uncomfortable, so I just kept moving. But there we have it, Hasselblad Part 1. Next time I'll go out with the 80mm lens that I have. That's close-ish to a 50mm lens, I think. And that'll be interesting to play with Z7, Z9, one or the other, and the Hasselblad around about the 50mm mark. It's been so good to see you. I'd love your thoughts about this. Are you a medium format person? Are you happy to stick with your 35mm? And do you think these cameras have any merit? Can we see the difference? I think there's more work to be done on this question, but there's certainly a difference, whether it is a meritorious enough difference or not to warrant the speed, the price, the weight. There's a lot of things to think about. So good to see you. If this is your first time here, I would love to see you again. So please do subscribe, please share, and please like.